I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Jill Wright, and I have been working with accreditation at ICC. I've probably been closely assigned accreditation for a year, but overall I've been working and been consulting for HLC for over 11 years. So I'm happy to be co-leading this process with.
I'm Julie Clemens.
You want to get in front of the camera, maybe?
Hello. Hello. I'm Julie Clemens. I teach music here at ICC, among other things, and I've had the pleasure of learning all about the EQUIP process and working with Dr. Wright on HLC accreditation stuff. So.
Julie has been phenomenal in what she has helped us do in the last couple of years. So thank you for coming. What we're going to do today is we're going to share with you some upcoming points about the accreditation visit that's coming up. We're going to share why it's important, how it will be deployed, what will happen, and then we're going to open it up to a group discussion, and that's why you have the card in front of you. So if you were at the morning session today, I know I'm repeating myself, so I'll do this very quickly. ICC is fully accredited, and the reaffirmation of accreditation process takes place every 3 to 7 to 10 years for institutions of higher learning. The reason that accreditation is a valuable process is it's a process that we go through institutionally that allows our students to receive Title IV financial aid. It allows for accredited schools receive credit from other accredited schools, and other schools take our credit. And then also, it really allows us as an institution to position ourselves in the workforce. As I said this morning, we have 19 external accreditations, primarily situated in our healthcare program, but not all situated to our healthcare program. I have 2 people sitting in here that have accredited programs, and one of the things that they have to prove to their accreditors is that they would have regional accreditation. And Julie has an accredited program that she manages in music, and we have to prove to them that we have regional accreditation. So really, regional accreditation sits here, and then many things come from it. With regional accreditation, there are 5 regional accreditors who are recognized by the Department of Education. The Department of Education actually holds the accountability portion of this. So today we're going to talk about the criterion for accreditation. That's what will go to HLC. There's a second part to this that we'll dig into as we go through the fall semester. So you'll hear more about this coming up, because there's a part of this called federal compliance. Federal compliance is the part that every institution in the United States, no matter which 5 of the regional accreditation institutions they roll up to, we all have to talk about federal compliance. And so federal compliance, you see a little bit of that coming out in the criterion, but some of the things we have to do for federal compliance, and I say have to do because we have to do this is not negotiable. For federal compliance, we have to give them our credit hours and our seat time. Remember, we talk a lot about that at this institution. So we have to give them, if we have a 3 credit hour class, we have to prove to them how it meets the standard seat time. We use the Carnegie Model. I don't know if anybody's ever used those words for you before, but we use what's called the Carnegie Model. Also for federal compliance, we have to show them that we have a process for student, employee, and community complaints. So we have to show them that we have a process, and we have to show that we act upon those data, that we're doing something about that. Also for federal compliance, we have to show them that we are meeting the interest of the community, that the funding that DOE, Department of Education, gives us, is that it meets the workforce needs of our community, which might help you understand we've had a recent renaissance, if you will, at ICC of workforce development. Remember, the community colleges were started, primarily many of us came up in the late 60s, early 70s, and in response to how Department of Education, that was their response to, we're going to train the workforce. And then many of us saw what happened in the 80s as things were stripped out of high schools. Vocational ed was pushed down to the community college level. And as a result of that, what has happened with federal compliance is many of you sitting in this room, if you're CTE, you have access to Carl Perkins funding. So Carl Perkins funding is actually part of what happens with DOE, that's part of federal compliance. Financial aid happens with DOE, that's part of federal compliance. Whether or not our credits transfer and whether or not we are assessing student learning and making differences and meeting the mission, that's HLC. Those are the big sweeping differences. And so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about HLC. We'll talk more about federal compliance later because it also includes truth in advertising. It also includes that we have to put all of our outcomes assessment data on our website. Let me repeat that. All of our outcomes data on our website. So all the data we have about student learning and how students are meeting outcomes in transfer at the discipline level, in CTE at the program level, what are our outcomes and how are our students meeting them? That's federal compliance. We have to be transparent to the public. Federal compliance also includes student athletics. How are we training our athletes? How are we recruiting our athletes? And how do we know that our athletes are meeting their student learning outcomes? We fall into an interesting category because they look at us differently because we feed into D1 schools. We're not D1 athletic, we're not D2 athletic. But a lot of times students come to community colleges because they want to be pushed into the Ds, pushed into the upper Ds. And so when they look at ICC, they're going to look at our student athletic program and they're going to say how many of those students do you have going on to D1 or D2 schools. So they're going to look to make sure that we're following regulations, because if we're playing an athlete for 2 years, they can only play 2 more years after that. Athletes have to be 25 years and under. So you can tell when these people come in, we have 6 people that are going to come to campus. They will have done much. They will know more about this campus than probably any one of us sitting in this room. They've already started reading about us. In June 1st, at 11:22 a.m., I hit the submit button. That submit button, we submitted 180-page systems portfolio document with over 372 evidence documents. Evidence documents ranged from something that might have been one simple table or one paragraph, all the way up to the faculty contract, the faculty handbook, the student athletic book, dual credit policies, our latest ICCB report. We're in an interesting situation because our ICCB report is due August 31st of this year. It's drafted, it's about ready to go. But when HLC comes in, we will not have completed our ICCB recognition because that process takes the state of Illinois a while. That doesn't mean it's our fault. We just have to tell them, because part of what has to happen for HLC is you have to show that you're compliant with your own state regulatory bodies. So we have a state regulatory body that HLC will look into. We have DOE that HLC will look into. We also have 19 other accreditations that HLC will look into. So when they come, these people will be very targeted and very positioned to tell us what they want to know more about. When they get here, what will happen is they'll be on campus 2 days, 2 very full days. We go to them, they don't come to us. If you were here during previous reaffirmation visits, we did things like we took them on campus tours. Folks, they don't want a campus tour. What they want is they will have large group sessions, and they'll have at least 5 open sessions. Those 5 open sessions will be open to the entire campus. During those 5 open sessions, you have in front of you on the card, you have 5 criteria for accreditation. During those open sessions, we're going to put them in 212 CD. We've already got those space reserved. I'm glad that Joe still likes me, because that was the same time as the WISE competition.
We only plan to work a year in advance.
I know. And then HLC gave us a call and we said, well, let's see if we can't move the WISE competition. So we will go to them in 212 CD, and they will have many sessions. And they will tell us who goes to what session. We don't tell them who goes to what session. They will tell us. They'll have 5 open sessions that are open to all employees. Those are gauged around the 5 criteria for accreditation. You have those in front of you. of those criterion, there's 94 subcomponents that they're looking for. That's just with the criterion. There's additional components that are in federal compliance that we'll talk about as the semester goes. So of those 94, we've already, like I said, we've already handed in 370 evidence documents. And what they do when they come on, they want to hear how you are working to help the institution meet those criteria for accreditation. So for criterion 1, mission. I put down 2 very common questions. We have no guarantees that those are the questions they're going to ask. Those are just very common questions that the reviewers ask. How do you help students meet the mission of an institution? They may ask you that. They'll gather in a large group, and they will ask you what area of the institution you're from before you offer your answer. And so if you say I'm from student services, they might expect a different answer than somebody who's from academics or somebody who's from facilities. They will also go through criterion 2, 3, 4, and 5 and do the very same thing. And then you have some sample questions in front of you. That does not begin to cover the scope and the depth of what they will ask. The whole criterion is on the HLC website. That's why you'll flip that sheet over. And you will see on the back of it, there's HLC's website. I would encourage you to get in there and dig around. Look through what they're calling their assumed practices. Look through their policy book. Their assumed practices, there are things that they are assuming that we are doing that they're not checking on. So there are assumed practices that every institution has to follow. For example, they assume that we have students. They don't come in and check every semester that we have students, right? They assume that we have them. So one of the ways what they will do, since they're assuming we have students, since they're assuming we're deploying classes, we're deploying a schedule, they will send out, about in November or December, they'll send our students a survey. They'll contact David Cook, and they'll tell him that they want about 50% of our student email addresses. And they will email our students. And they will email them a survey, about a 50-question survey. They know when they email about 50% of our students. It's random. It's random. They intend to get about 33% of those back. They send follow-ups if they don't hear back from students. Those go directly to HLC. We don't see those. As a matter of fact, we don't see those until the peer review team gives us those. And when the peer review team comes on campus, what they will do, some of their questions are modeled around what our students say about us. So they also have, beyond the 5 criterion sessions, they also have sessions where they will talk just to students, without us being in the room. We have to open it up to all students. We don't invite students. Last year I did 17 of these visits. I was in institutions where sometimes there were 3 students in the room, sometimes there were 300 students in the room. That's whatever you get. You expect that students are going to complain about parking. You expect students are going to complain about textbooks. And you expect that students are going to complain about the cost of higher ed. Those are the 3 things you just lop off the top. So you let them get that out, and then they'll dig into what the students said in that survey, and they'll validate that with that group of students. These people are well-trained professionals. They'll validate that with students. Then they'll take those set of student responses, and they'll circle back. And they'll say, here's what your students said beyond the survey. And when they write us a follow-up report, they typically say, students said this in the survey, they said this in the open session. Here's how we'd like you to maybe think about some improvements going forward. So they'll listen to that student voice. They'll likely have a session with nothing but part-time employees. They want to know what the part-time employees say. Why is this becoming a larger concern in higher ed, because as higher ed funding is cut, we have more and more part-time employees at all institutions, not just at this institution. So they want to know how we're utilizing part-time employees. They'll circle back to some of the information that we have submitted to them in the past. In the past, we had some strategic issues. Every time they look at a report from us, every 4 years we submit something, they come back with 3 to 5 strategic issues. We didn't fix all those strategic issues. Let me say that again. We didn't fix all those strategic issues. They're going to circle back. They're going to ask us where you're at with this, what's going on. We have begun to address those strategic issues, but we're not done. But the good news is that this is CQI. At the end of the day, they're here for quality continuous improvement. So, one of the strategic issues that they looked at, that we're still addressing, is they asked us to really take a deep dive and look at how we are credentialing and how we are moving forward successful faculty, the evaluation process, and online learning. We're circling back to that, we're getting to that. They asked us how we are making documented improvements in our assessment processes. So if you're collecting assessment data, how are you documenting that, and how are you making improvements based on that? We're getting there. We're getting there. One of the things that they're looking deeply at now for institutions, which is new on the radar screen, and we had a bump in the road, and they heard about it in the report that was submitted, and they're likely to hear about it again when they get here. And that's the thing, you tell HLC what you know. You don't sugarcoat things. We had to do our faculty credentialing twice. And we're still not completely done with that. But they'll talk to us about that process. And just so everybody knows, faculty credentialing is not new. It's always been there. It got put on the radar screen. DOE put it on the radar screen and asked the 5 regional agencies to take care of it. It's always been there. There's been one faculty credential that's ever changed in the whole 11 years that I've been a peer reviewer. One and only one. One language. You used to be able to have a heritage speaker with a master's degree teaching foreign language. That's the one and only that changed. They then transformed that to a master's degree in the discipline. They've always been there. HLC just never looked. HLC looked. HLC took a peek in after they were hearing from institutions that were graduating students who didn't have clinical rotations in hospitals but were graduating with nursing degrees. They took a look after students were saying, hey, I have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in this discipline, and I can't get a job. I feel like I didn't learn anything. We didn't put it on the community. We didn't put it on the radar screen. They had students saying, I've gone into this deep of debt. I have $120,000 in student debt. And found out I was taught by nobody who has the right degree. So that was put on the radar screen probably in 2007. And then it just kept building momentum as we went. And then in 2014, HLC told all the schools it was coming, at big open forums, and you had to be compliant by 2017. So these are things that HLC will want to look into. What was your process? Did you follow it? And what did you do? They're very interested in what our processes are in moving forward these large initiatives. A lot of times when they ask their questions on evidence, they want to know what your process is, how do you participate in it, and what do you do with the evidence that you have? How do you use it? They're also very interested, we're in Illinois. Illinois is one of the only one of the 19 states that we just finally, we're out of the woods finally last year. When Illinois started going into not funding higher ed and not having a state budget for 2 years in a row, Illinois was the only state out of the 19-state region we had to send them a financial report. We had to tell them, here's how we're going to fund this without state funding. So when Bruce showed the slide this morning that showed the reserves, they'll be very interested in that, because to be compliant, we have to maintain a quarter of our operating budget has to be in reserves. We don't meet federal compliance. 25% of our operating budget has to be in reserves. We have to be able to support ourselves 25% of the time without anything coming in. So you think about other institutions that you've heard in the state of Illinois that got on the radar screen. Eastern, WIU, Chicago State. There were community colleges down in Southern Illinois that went together. They couldn't go it alone anymore. And then you think about what else they're going to look at, because we're in the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois has the third largest community college system in the United States. We are second only to Florida and Texas. And so they look heavily at Illinois' community colleges because we have 48 colleges. And the community colleges, the Chicago 7, the city colleges, are funded very differently than we are. However, HLC really likes the Chicago 7 model. Here's what they like about the Chicago 7 model. This is what HLC is trying to get their arms around with the state of Illinois because they don't understand what's going on. We're a very unique region. We are one of the few states in the 19-state region of HLC that we have our own assessment methods. I walk into other states, their state tells them how to do assessment. They have a big portal at the state level, they're putting all their assessment data in. We don't have that. We don't have that. So when they come, they're going to be very curious about what we're doing with our assessment. They're going to be very curious why we only send information to ICCB every 5 years. But these are things we can explain, because we're doing more with assessment than once every 5 years. So a lot of it will be curiosity by peer reviewers. And then here's what else HLC will do that's a very interesting process. We have to post on our website, and we got to take ads out in the Peoria Journal-Star, and we'll take ads out throughout our large district. In every newspaper in our district, we have to put an ad in there that said, hey folks, HLC's coming to town. So when people look at the budget and academic services this year, they're like, wow, why do you have so much money? I don't. I have to buy newspaper, the college has to buy newspaper ads. I know that's not all money we're using. This is about a $30,000 venture for us this year. That's how much HLC says to set aside for these reaffirmation visits, $30,000. So we have to take out ads in every newspaper in our district, and on the internet, we'll put them on our website, and we'll probably do something on Facebook or something. But we have to show to them, the onus is on us, we have to show them the evidence that we have reached out to all of District 514 and told them HLC is coming to town. And then, not only they send something anonymous to students, right? Then, community members get to send in information on us. Do you have anything you'd like to tell us about ICC? And they get to read the public comments. And some will be anonymous, some people will sign them. I went into an institution in Kansas one time, we had over 300 public comments. We follow up on every one of those public comments. We aggregate and we sort them and we follow them up. So it's going to be an in-depth visit. It's going to be a whirlwind of 3 days. But we will be ready. And your role in this is, we are doing so many good things at this institution that we can talk to them about. So if we take a look, like for example, if we look at Mission 2, talks about integrity, criterion. They're very interested in higher ed on how we're ethical and integrity and how we live that out in our institution. So I've already told them we're compliant, right? We've all gone through ethics training. I had the data to show it from HR. I've got that. So they're not going to ask you, did you have ethics training? They're going to ask you, how do you know that we are giving ethical, responsible information to students? Any ideas? How are we giving them ethical, responsible information? I hope Kate raises her hand. I hope Ethan raises his hand. I hope Kate raises her hand and she says, well, I have librarians.
Right. Qualified.
I have qualified librarians and they help our students do research, right? Peer-reviewed research. We teach them quality research. I hope Jim raises his hand. And Jim says, I teach literature, I teach writing. I help students understand sound research processes. I help them document their sources. I hold my students accountable for MLA. I hope Paulette says, I hold my students accountable for APA. We're doing these things. It's just the language that they come at you with is so different. It's a language we don't necessarily always speak correctly. This is a very different language. So when we are asked these questions, I just want you to think about what you do every day at ICC, how you contribute to this. If they ask you, how do you know the information you're deploying is ethical and responsible? How do you know that? This is sometimes what you get when peer reviewing too. This is sometimes what I get.
Well,
How
I
do you
do
know
my
what-
research.
How do you know what you're deploying is ethical? How do you know? You're working in a lab setting.
We draw all of our learning criteria and basically everything that goes into the program from accepted standards in the profession and our third-party accreditation.
Beautiful.
So they outline standards of ethical behavior, honesty, integrity, and we basically follow that.
Beautiful. Right? You're following outside acceptable standards.
All of our curriculum goes through a curriculum committee.
All of our curriculum goes
Specific
through.
set of standards,
Yep.
either for textbooks and for learning outcomes and content.
So we have standards. And so part of what makes us ethical and responsible is that we set our own standards, right? And we follow our own standards. HLC is an interesting body because you get to police yourself. They won't tell you what your standards should be. That's why they'll ask you, what are your standards? Tell me what curriculum committee is responsible for. Now we're going to go back and see, do you have the evidence to show us that that's what you're really doing? So evidence is the key thing for HLC. That's what for those of us who went through reaffirmation last time. Remember last time because they were running around asking people, what are your general education goals? And now that time's passed. Yeah, that time has passed. Now they're like, oh, they'll come in and they say, oh, we see you have 3 ILOs. Tell us how your students participated in getting those ILOs approved. How did you get the voice of the student when you decided what your ILOs were?
And what happens when someone says, I don't know?
That'll happen.
I know.
That will happen. They'll write it down. They don't make any judgments while they're there. It's very different. We don't know what they're thinking when they leave. They don't report out anymore. Aaron?
Kind of related to that. So I'm just curious, because I really don't know anything about this. So I am not in any way presuming this would happen, but just suppose that they read our report and they come to campus and it all just goes horribly wrong. Like it's just a complete disaster. What happens? Like what
Well,
happens next?
that has happened, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Again, I'm not presuming it, but
Right,
I'm curious.
yeah.
Like, what's at
Well,
stake?
and that has happened.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I see some real potential areas for pitfalls on these
Right.
questions, where that question gets asked and you get the right people in the room and It's going south.
Well, now you have to think, they're going to compare this to some things. They have a 180-page documented report. They have 370 evidence documents already. They recognize that every institution has dissenters. Every institution has dissenters. And if it does go south, they walk away, they regroup. They won't tell you that it's gone south. After they leave, they have 30 days to ask us for more information. And so what they'll do is they'll ask us for further documentation. So they come February 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And here's one of my clues that things are going south. I have some clues because I've been through some of this before, but on the other side of the chair. When they schedule a 3-day visit, but let's hope it's only 2. They schedule a 3-day visit, let's hope it's only 2. If they go south, what will happen is they'll generally write the report and they'll tell you, we didn't find this, or we didn't find this, or we heard this, but you said this, so can you validate which is true? And so when they leave here, the onus is on them. They'll write the report that, usually when you get down, the report that they hand over is about a 65-page report. So they'll put together the missing pieces. And if they're missing information or they need further drill down information, that's when they will contact the institution. But these are external peer reviewers. These people are trained. So, and often what will happen when they see things going south, they'll regroup and say, okay, we know that this institution is better than this. How can we maybe reframe and reshape some of this? Because I've been on those teams before too. But we're doing such good work here. We're doing such good work at ICC. And that's why I wanted you guys to take a look at what the criteria are, and take a look at some of those potential questions. We're going to have more meetings about this as the fall goes on. The last thing we want to do is we don't want to prompt people, because we want people to be their authentic selves. Because one of the things HLC helps us through is they want to help us get better. When they leave, by the time their report is submitted, they will say whether or not they have evidence to support the 94 subcomponents of the criterion for accreditation. They have to respond to all 94 of them. They have to write a statement for all 94. And then they have to say, should this institution be able to select its own pathway? There are 2 pathways for accreditation. There's the open pathway and the standard pathway. So should we be able to choose which one we go to? At the end of the day, both pathways, you have to meet the criterion for accreditation. And then they answer a third question. Should this institution have a follow-up? Should they have to give us more information in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months, in a year and a half, in 2 years? I've been on visits where I'm still reviewing institutional information 3 years later from visits. And I went to one in Kansas and it went south. We had over 300 public comments. Changed the whole tone of our visit. Because we had to follow up on some information. So that's why the best way we can situate ourselves is to think one of the ways that we can be ready is be ready to respond to the criteria. I don't think it's going to go south. We have so many good people working here, and we're doing so many good things. Faculty have made such large strides with assessment. Student Services has made such large strides with our enrollment process. We have made such large, sometimes painful strides with some of the ways that we brought ourselves back into compliance. I'm no fool. That faculty credentialing process was painful. And I told HLC about that in the report that extracted. It was painful. But now we're in compliance. But we're really not in compliance. Because the state of Illinois, in its infinite wisdom, has decided that we can hire, we will hire, we don't get to decide, we will hire dual credit students that meet 50% of their credential, all the way through 2021.
You mean instructors?
Instructors.
I mean, excuse me, instructors, yes. I'm very disturbed by that.
Yes.
I'm very disturbed. The whole state of Illinois is very disturbed by that. All the community colleges are very disturbed by that.
And we've been walking against that for a couple of years now.
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, the state of Illinois, ICCB, is pending legislation. And the faculty will find out about it here very soon. You guys are in the process of finding out
I think
about it.
faculty just got an email.
You guys just got an email. It's pending legislation. Let me back up and tell you the full story. When this all began in 2014-15, I went to the HLC conference, and by then I was pretty entrenched in being a peer reviewer, and I knew things were happening, and there were lines up the hall from community colleges when they said, you know what, we've got the criterion for accreditation, we've got the assumed practices, it says the faculty meet these credentials, we're going to start holding institutions accountable in 2017. And so that was painful, that was very painful. And so HLC backed off. And HLC said, okay, and actually one of the people that backed off through HLC, if you've been here long enough, you might remember Eric Martin. Eric Martin used to be an adjunct faculty member in English. Eric Martin is now the chief executive officer of HLC. He's a great guy. Got a master's degree from Illinois State University, fantastic man. So Eric Martin, coming from the state of Illinois and coming from a community college system, he said, back off, let's give this time. And he said, so what we're going to allow, and he worked with the HLC board to allow this, he said, if institutions want to have an extension, because this is going to bring community colleges to their knees. It's going to cripple Minnesota, it's going to cripple Wisconsin, it's going to cripple the Dakotas, and it's going to cripple the tribal colleges. There are many tribal colleges throughout the 19-state region, and they have an interesting accreditation process. I've been through those. We can talk about that another day. That's a very interesting process to go through, because you have to do tribal, DOE, and HLC. And tribal is fascinating in a good way. Anyhow, they said, okay, we're going to give institutions extensions. You can have an extension, but you have to request one. So what happened is Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Indiana, they all stepped up to the plate as states, and they said, we're going to request an extension as a state. HLC said, okay, here's everybody, states and other colleges, including universities and community colleges within the 19-state region that have requested to have time to work on this and not implement until 2022. And HLC had one discriminating criteria to get the extension. Do you know what it was? You had to apply. The whole state, the whole Ivy Tech system applied. The Minuscule, they're called the Minuscule system out of Minnesota. They applied. The whole Wisconsin system and all the tribal colleges applied. Tribal colleges go Dakota, Wisconsin, Minnesota. And so they all applied. Well, there were a few community colleges and universities in Illinois that applied. Well, then what happened is all the community colleges and universities, they did their faculty quals. The people who were impacted by the most faculty quals in the state of Illinois were primarily dual credit teachers. And so dual credit high school teachers lobbied. And much to the surprise of community college presidents and vice presidents, HLC turned the other way and said, go ahead. Go ahead. And so now we're up against pending legislation. Governor Browner started the legislation, Pritzker's finishing it, that says that dual credit faculty, they only need to meet 50% of the credential. They have until 2022 to meet the rest of the credential.
Oh, so they're not saying 50% forever, they just mean it's 50% now and then in 2022.
They gotta have the full credential.
5%.
Yeah, they gotta have the full credential in 2022. So when we come in, when HLC comes in, they'll ask us how we're managing that, because it's likely to become law. So the good news is, when the report was written and submitted on June 1st at 11:22 a.m., the report said, we are in total compliance, because we were. Now, when they come in, we may not be in total compliance. So what happens when things go south there, and it's a long answer? That's an example of things going south. What happens is the likelihood is they're going to circle back to us in 2022 and they're going to say, show us that you're in full compliance with your faculty qualifications, including all those dual credit people. I don't know the impact it's going to have on dual credit yet, because we don't know the people with 50% falls that want to teach. So we have conflicting laws with ICCB and HLC. That's when things go a little south. It's things like that that we can't control, so don't fret. But I think what we can do is I think we can show them that we are doing institutional movements that have made such differences in what they have asked us to work on. They asked us to work on assessment. We got to work, didn't we? We got to work. They asked us to work on online learning. We got to work. They asked us to take a look and be consistent with our prerequisites of our students. We got to work. So there are so many good things that we're doing that we'll talk about. Jim?
So what happens then if, we get, there's a mark for something that we need to do? What happens if it doesn't get done?
Well, if it doesn't get done, there are tiers that happen. What happens is often institutions will have what's called follow-up monitoring reports. And I'm going to go to the Pima Community College system out in Arizona. Okay? Pima Community College system out in Arizona, they were upside down on faculty walls. I went out there, they were upside down, and here's why they were upside down. Because the state of Arizona, in its infinite wisdom, don't think we're the only one that has infinite wisdom. We're not. We are not. The state of New Mexico, in its infinite wisdom, has decided that everybody teaching Composition 1 in any course at a community college will have the very same outcomes, no matter where it's offered at, and the very same textbooks. There's some infinite wisdom, right? Well, that's what New Mexico has done. There's some repercussions to that. So the state of Arizona. So I had the repercussions of that New Mexico on a visit. State of Arizona, in its infinite wisdom, it decided that it was going to pass legislation. They knew HLC was getting busy, and they said, oh, we're going to beat HLC. So what they did is they passed the state law that said everybody teaching in a community college right now is forever credentialed. I know we got to go.
No, you're losing your voice.
It's forever credentialed. And so you go in as an HLC site visitor, and you look at that you look at legislation, and you look at their faculty, and they're not in HLC compliance. And so what you do is you say, we gave them, we knew it was a heavy lift, we said this has to get done. Well, their board of regents, it's an interesting system. We elect all of our trustees. You go to different states, they do it different ways. Like in Ohio, half of them are appointed by the governor, half of them are elected. I think in Arizona, they're all appointed by the governor, so you go there and the people don't know anything about the college because they're friends with the governor. That won't happen here, right? They're gonna meet with our board of trustees, they know us. That's a good thing. So, long story short, we said, you got a monitoring report, clean this up. Well, they couldn't clean it up because they were getting all these lawsuits. So, long story short, colleges typically clean it up, but sometimes they don't clean it up, perhaps through external problems. So what happened with the Pima Community College system is they eventually went on sanction, because you go monitoring, probation, sanction. They went on sanction, and they had to bring in a team from HLC, and HLC had to walk them through how to clean it up, because they didn't clean it up. Because the politics, because the Board of Regents was saying, you got fired. I worked for the governor, he's legal. And so they didn't clean it up. We put them on sanction, and it was ugly, and they got all kinds of lawsuits. They finally cleaned it up, and 2 years later, we took them off sanction. But if you remain on sanction too long, what happens when you're on sanction, it's happened to colleges around us. It happened to College of DuPage. When you're put on sanction or probation, you have to put on your website that you're not accredited, and here's why. And you have to let the students know, because what that means is that your credit, schools have a right not to accept your credit. Remember way back in the beginning, I said part of why you want regional accreditation is because your credit means something. So on COD's website, and COD was not alone. On COD's website, what happened is COD had to put out there, hey, we're not fully accredited, and here's what we have to clean up. So just know that if you go here, other schools have a right not to accept your credit.
When was this?
It happened, I was in on that one too, that was fun. Does anybody remember what happened to COD? What happened at COD, and it wasn't the administrations, it was the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees was actually cited, and there was evidence that their Board of Trustees, you know how we do a bid process? We have a very formal bid process. If you have something over $25, it has to go through bid. They were skirting the bid process and giving business to their family and friends. Ouch, yikes.
Oh, that sounds about right.
And so they ended up, their president was dismissed, their Board of Trustees was dismissed. It was interesting to watch and go through.
So you said monitoring, probation, sanction.
Mhm.
So I assume ICC is not on any of those currently?
No, we're on
I have
nothing.
no idea.
And I don't anticipate we're gonna be on anything when they.
I'm just trying to understand how the process
Yeah,
works.
that's how the
all
process,
it
you
is.
guys are going to worst case scenario.
I'm just-
No. I'm going to best case scenario. I anticipate when they leave, they have to answer 5 questions, and based on those 94 data points that they're gonna input, they're gonna say we've either met with concern, or not met the 5 criterion. You gotta meet the whole criterion to get met. If any part of it's not met, you get not met. If any parts of it's concerned, you get a met with concern.
And not met means,
I don't have the evidence, you're not giving me documented evidence that you're doing this. Documented evidence, not just narrative. Voicing data is not documented evidence in the land of HLC. You're not giving me documented evidence. So if our students come and they say, you can't believe it, we don't have any place to park, like we're parking on the street.
They'll probably say that.
I've heard some crazy things about students. They're my favorite group to meet with. They're funny.
I'm just, if we're short in something, that's what I'm concerned with. So we have not met one of those 90-something criteria. 94 criteria. They come back and ask for more information.
For more information. That's the first thing they do.
And what if the answer is, well, we're not doing it?
If the answer is we're not doing it, we tell them that. And we say, but here's our plan to get it done.
Yeah, that's typically where we're at.
Right.
If there's anything that we're not quite like perfected yet,
Yeah.
we have a plan to get it done.
Right.
And this is what we're gonna plan to do.
Right.
And they may come back and ask us later, well, did you do it?
And
Still got the
then
plan.
Yeah.
they'll say, did you do it? Because they'll say, if we've got the plan to do it, then they'll say, okay, that's fine. I see this is where you're gonna be in 3 months and 6 months and 9 months. We're gonna come back and see. McHenry County Community College, anybody heard of them? Okay. So McHenry County College. Here's what they recently said about them. They live to tell about it. They said, so about the assessment stuff, I see you've got some starting points, but you're not quite there yet. So we'd like to come back and do another visit. So here's where we'd like you to be by this date. So, you're still accredited. That's a monitoring report. If you get monitored, there's nothing that goes on your website. There's no dings against your accreditation. Folks, let me tell you, this morning when I said 990, I checked last night with Linnea. 900, and she's one of the VPs for HLC. 998 institutions currently have full accreditation. There are 30 to 40 that are on sanction or probation. Of those, I asked her, I said, of those 998, how many have monitoring reports? She said, a lot. She said, remember, you can function with monitoring, you just have to stay on. And why is this so different this time? It's because if you think about when you turn on the media, how often do you hear students say, I have a degree, it's not doing anything for me? I'm not saying that's true or false, that's just what the media presents, right? I'm deep in student debt. I couldn't finish because. They're going to be really interested in our completion and retention numbers and what we're doing to help students persist and retain. They're going to be very interested. They're going to like what we're doing with the equity and ATD initiatives. They're going to like that
Because we're systemically removing barriers one by one. They're going to like that we have 5 teams that are comprised of faculty and staff alike. I see so many things that they're going to like around here, just based on what I've seen at other schools and what I know about HLC. We're doing some really good things. So when we talk about teaching and learning and evaluation of our students, I mean, they want to know, how are you engaging those students in the classroom? They want to hear your wonderful stories.
So will they see the report that we submitted in the 2000?
They see all of them. They see our whole institutional file all the way back from the beginning.
So for instance, the Teaching and Learning Center.
Mm-hmm.
The last time we went through this, we had a vibrant Teaching and Learning Center.
Mm-hmm.
What we have right now is a decimated Teaching and Learning Center.
Mm-hmm.
So will they see and what's going on here?
What they'll ask is not necessarily about physical space. They'll ask, what are we doing to help faculty and staff professionally develop? They'll say, what are you doing? What are you offering? So it's not about physical space, because they understand that student enrollment is shrinking across the United States and that institutions have to do what they do to reduce footprint and to reduce cost. But in that reduction of a footprint and in that reduction of cost, how are you still engaging your entire workforce, not just faculty, your entire workforce in professional development? And that's on there. They'll look at that out of criterion 3. They'll look at the engagement in professional development. They'll look at whether or not we give faculty and staff the ability to develop a professional development plan. We do. It's on everybody's evaluation, right? That's evidence that we give them an opportunity. And they'll ask, of that evidence, how many people are taking advantage of that opportunity? Okay, of those that took advantage of that opportunity, what evidence do you have that they benefited from that opportunity? What did they bring back and change at the institution as a result of that opportunity? So that's how they dig into that. So again, that's why it's not necessarily about campus tours anymore. They understand reductions in workforce. They understand reduction in size. They understand reduction in student bodies, because this is happening across the United States.
And reduction of service.
They understand that, are you still offering quality academic programming and student services? That's the question they ask. How do you define that quality? It's how we define the quality. If that's how you're defining quality, show us the evidence that you're meeting that quality. All right, we're way out of time. We're going to have more sessions, guys. But we're doing so many good things. Don't be panicked of HLC.
Well, I know the last time we had an in-person big deal visit with the Gen Ed, we didn't even start working on it until maybe then a year. I don't know. It was crazy. It was only my second year here, so
I mean, you think about how much we've done with ILOs, right? I mean, we had a great and I went and talked to the Gen Ed committee and the assessment committee. So if you're on those, you've heard this before. But you think about what we did. We did so many good things. We had 7 Gen Ed goals that we realized were way more than 7 Gen Ed goals, right? So we went through that process. We got faculty voice that said, we got to change these, right? Jim, you remember that? Faculty said, we got to change these. These Gen Ed goals aren't working. And then what did we do next? After we said they're not working, oh my gosh, we're going to enlist a faculty joint committee to get them going, to relook at these things, right? We did a year of that, relooking and reshaping. And then what did we do after we relooked and reshaped? We said, oh, now we got to get our curriculum in order. We have a great process. Oh, now that we've got our curriculum in order, it's time to assess them. And that's where we were. And now that we've assessed them, remember, we have one great semester of assessment data. We got another semester that's due September 30th. And now you look at the assessment calendar, what does it say we're going to do? We're going to review, we're going to summarize, we're going to analyze, and then we're going to make changes. So we've got some really good things going on with general education program. And that's what they'll call it. When they're talking about general education programming, they're talking about our ILOs. So we have a lot of good things going for us. And so we should be thankful that HLC is coming. We're coming off a great history with HLC. We're well positioned to do very well during this visit. We just have to tell our story. We just have to tell our story. It's what we do every day. That's why we're here, right? That's why we're here. All right, more to come, guys.
Thanks, Jill.